This panel, I hope, will get us to be able to talk about how creativity and mastery are about all the things that we really don't get a chance to discuss very often, messy first drafts and failure. And I think it's fitting that it happens at Sundance.
So what I did in preparation for this panel, I went to the dictionary to look up the word. And the way it was defined, failing to perform a duty, and I underlined the word duty, or expected action, underlined the word expected. Lack of success, decay. Inability to perform a normal function, I underlined the word normal. So you put duty, expected, and normal together, what you've basically got is a definition of the word conventional. And so I decided that I didn't like the description of the word failure. I thought it was narrow and limited, but it seemed to be the thing we all had to live by. And would it be possible to maybe contribute to redefining that word, and particularly for artists? Sundance, from its beginnings, has been unconventional. And independent film follows that. It's an unconventional, considering what the word conventional means, it's an unconventional way of going about creating things. There's a certain freedom, in my mind, attached to it, so that, for example, if you have 4 walls, this would be removing one of the walls. So there's a certain foundation we all have to adhere to, otherwise we go haywire. But by taking away one of the walls, then that gives you the freedom to explore, to experiment, to try things, and I think that is the artist's way.
Yeah, so I'll tell a really humiliating story. And I went out to staff, which I hadn't done in years, and meeting on all kinds of shows that I would never even watch. Meeting with, you need to have a meeting with the showrunner. A few minutes later, you don't even need to meet the showrunner. He loves you to I got a call from the business manager. Oh, tell Howard, my business manager for my agent, it's time to pop the champagne. That was on a Friday. On a Monday, no offer. On Thursday, I emailed him at noon, and I said, if you know something, please put me out of my misery. Phone rang. It was my agent and the president of the agency calling to tell me together that my feeling was right, something had gone wrong. He had asked around about me and heard that I was difficult, and the offer wasn't coming. I started sobbing on the phone. I feel so bad for Jay Suris at UTA, who had to listen to this, and he offered me a loan. He said, tell me how much money you need, I'll write you a check. And I told him. I guess I probably shouldn't be specific with that, but it was a really nice amount of money. I hung up the phone and said to my husband that evening, who's here right now, I'm going to double down on me. Let's use that money to make a short. And I did. I made my first short, Una Ora. Por favor, got into the shorts competition. Came up here and took that bus ride up to meet you. Wore that director credential around my neck. Came back a year later with my feature and won the directing award. I mean, whoever that person was who called me difficult to that showrunner so that I didn't get that job, was it protecting me? And at the time, it felt like the worst thing in the world, and it brought me here.
Some people, when they come on hardship, quit because it's insurmountable. The obstacles are too great, and they don't see any hope or any light on the other side, so they say, I've had it, that's it, and they quit. And others keep going, but for no other reason than that's all there is to do. There's no reason behind it. It's just you keep going. If somebody were to ask you, well, why are you going through it? Everything seems impossible. The answer would be, I don't know. It's just that I'm going to continue.
For me, I remember starting as a public defender when I was just starting in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and trying to represent a young man who I was convinced was innocent, charged with a horrible rape murder. And I and the small legal team we were working with failed him. And although we were convinced of his innocence, and lots of the people of Hattiesburg were convinced of his innocence, he was convicted in a horribly, racially charged atmosphere, and as a 19-year-old young man, never been charged with anything but stealing some $6 worth of gas. And he was convicted and sentenced to life in prison, avoided the death penalty. And I remember weeping in that courtroom the day the case fell apart, and understanding just how much we had failed him in that moment. The failure was compounded. He was exonerated 25 years later, 2 years after he died in prison. We'd known he was innocent the whole time. And the fact we couldn't prove what was proved 25 years later with DNA was one of the tragedies that defined my own work. And for me, it reminds us of, it's important not to romanticize failure, especially when lives are at stake. I think the weight we carry with failure is important to recognize and to work with. If you don't find a way to carry that weight, you can find yourself defeated.
As a surgeon, I simply cannot think that the task is about me. I mean, I cannot fail that patient. That's sort of the goal. Yet I know in the aggregate, over many years of practice, I'm going to fail at some point, right? There are always bad outcomes in medicine. And so that's an inherently humbling thing where really the failure is, I mean, it doesn't affect your life in anywhere close to the extent that it would affect the lives of the patient. And so my work in terms of studying the neuroscience of creativity has really been all about understanding that we'll never answer. I know I'll never succeed. How can you possibly try to attempt to study the neuroscience of creativity and ever get to the end of it? It can't be done. I mean, the creativity, art, these things have been around forever, all of human eternity. They will continue to be around forever, and no amount of scientific experimentation, no matter how clever they might be, is ever going to answer the question, solve the mystery, not even close. So I don't even ever have that as a goal. I literally just want to know a little more tomorrow than I knew today. It's that simple.
If any of you would care to share your secrets, I mean, we all know what failure feels like, and when you're caught up in the moment, do you have any secrets or mantras you use to get through that personal tragedy?
I think probably one way to get through it is to cut back to something deep within yourself as to what your personal strength is in terms of what you believe and what will give you perseverance and strength in a time of a downtime. And then the only danger there is you want to be able to be vulnerable at the same time. You want to carry with you humility. Otherwise, you'll be arrogant and you'll assume that no one can tell you what to do and you're always right, and that's a whole other way to go. So there's a fine line in there about being set back, being criticized or what have you, or having something fail, and yet being able to go forward by having a certain belief in yourself that you'll stick by.
Well, we were talking also about the need for sort of this dichotomy of you've got your inner editor, which is the discernment part that's essential to know, is this as good as it can be, or does this one need to be thrown away, or do you need to keep trying? And that's like the inner critic that, you know, we all have and can be paralyzing, but at the same time, you need the inner optimist idiot too, you know, who's always like, that's a great idea, you know, like no matter how irrational it is, like to spend years and tens of $millions on a film or whatever, it's like, it's irrational, right, on a certain level. But that inner optimist idiot has to be loud. You picture him like Elmo or something. Hey, yeah, you know, every morning waking up, go do it. And if you're missing one or the other, you're in trouble. But those two sort of have to be existing at all times to sort of get something done, especially in the inherently irrational process of making art, which doesn't make sense in itself, you know, but you have to do it.
I'm not so sure the opposite of failure is success, and it's in part why I decided to write this. I think that what you're describing, this ever onward almost, is really actually what mastery is, ultimately. There's this epigraph that starts a chapter where Michelangelo said, "Lord, grant that I always desire more than I can accomplish," you know. That's what thriving is about, that's what striving is about, but I think success is often what someone confers on you. It's more an event. Someone now thinks you've made it, where internally you might think something else.
I'll just mention that I don't feel like a success at all. I won the directing award, nominated for a Spirit Award, but still filled with shame every Sunday reading the New York Times and seeing that the movie didn't make it to be nominated for an Oscar or a Golden Globe, and looking at the stars and the 2-page buys, and I'm not as good as the Coen brothers, and I'm not as good as Scorsese, and I'm not as good as David O. Russell, still filled with self-hatred and feeling like a real failure last week. It never gets better.
I'm not big on awards. I think that one of the things I've noticed that started to bother me had to do with skiing. I love to ski, and so I would go skiing, and I would see they have these classes for kids. They would be coming from New York or someplace in the East. They come out to Vail, Colorado, or some of the bigger resorts, and they were given prizes and ribbons instead of just being encouraged to go out and have fun, you know. And the kids would strive for something that was sort of almost unnatural, because I got to get a ribbon, I got to get a trophy, and it bothered me. I thought, I don't know that that's the way. I'm glad that happened after my kids were born, because I would have not liked it. There's a different kind of way to have you can have a kind of a freedom, but sometimes awards can get in the way of just enjoying the experience of working, just enjoying the experience of creating without consideration for the outcome.
I think that the book does it so well and sort of framed it a lot better than I ever could, about surrender, about being able to release oneself, and then sort of everything can sort of, I don't know how you put it, a lot better than I do, but it's essential to know that sometimes you need to forgive yourself, give up almost to find your way.